Great. Hello. Good evening, everybody. And I'd like to call this meeting of the Technical Working Group Subcommittee of June 11th, 2026 to order. Let's begin with a roll call and confirm that we have a quorum present to proceed with tonight's agenda. Diane, please proceed with roll call.
Thank you, Chair. City of Brisbane.
Harry O'Connell here.
Town of Woodside.
Paul Gold here.
Town of Hillsborough. Absent. City of Millbrae.
Present.
City of San Bruno. Absent. City of Burlingame.
That's right there.
Thank you, Chair. We have a quorum.
Thank you. We're going to start with a regular agenda, even though this is more of a workshop type of proceeding that we're going to be doing. And at this time, I'd like to invite anyone for public comments for items that are not on the agenda. Please remember, speakers are limited to 2 minutes, and the subcommittee cannot take action on items raised during public comment. Diane, do we have any members of the public who would like to make a public comment not on the agenda?
Currently, we do not have any virtual hands raised on Zoom, but we have one in the room.
Hello, it's Lynn Cam, architect and resident of Pacific. Just want to let the subcommittee know that we're getting a lot more airplane noise over houses in Pacifica and late nights, especially between the hours of 12 and 2. Sometimes they go over every couple of minutes, and these are even an hour period. It's unacceptable. This was going on before the break tour. As I mentioned at the full meeting, I've looked at some of the aircraft they're going over, and the small ones, they're going to the East Coast and then making the turn.
Thank you. Are there any other members online?
No, there are no other members.
Okay. Before we begin today's workshop, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to participate in what I believe is an important discussion for the future of the Quiet program. As many of you know, the Technical Working Group has been reviewing the Fly Quiet program for some time. And during our review, we have examined comparable programs at other airports, reviewed the existing metrics, discussed potential additions and refinements, and gathered feedback from Technical Working Group members, Roundtable, airport staff, technical consultants, and members of the public. The purpose of tonight's workshop is to take a deeper dive into the proposed metrics, ensure we have thoughtfully vetted the program before making final recommendations to the full roundtable. Our goal is to have an open and collaborative discussion focused on how we can make this program as effective as possible in reducing aircraft noise impacts in our community. Before we begin, I'd like to ask each of our panelists and technical experts to briefly introduce themselves and state the organization they represent so everyone understands the perspectives and expertise being brought to today's discussion. Let's start with our airport partner, Bert.
Good afternoon, evening. My name is Bert Ganong. I'm the office manager for San Francisco International Airport.
Thank you.
Gene Reindell, HMMH, the technical consultant to the Roundtable.
Vanessa Lee, I'm the Roundtable coordinator.
Diana Stepana, Roundtable clerk.
Oh, that's right there. I'm with the City of Burlingame.
Terry O'Connell, City of Brisbane.
Paul Gold from the town of Woodside.
I'm Darlene Yapley. I'm the president and co-founder of the Aviation Impacted Communities Alliance. And on the phone joining me, I'll introduce her as Marie Jo Fremont. She's the Chief Policy Officer. AICA represents 90 groups across the United States focused on aviation issues. And we also work with the Congressional Quiet Skies Caucus. We both serve on the program committee for the UC Davis Aviation Noise and Emissions Symposium and have presented on topics including Fly Quiet programs, FAA noise policy and metrics, and flight procedure redesign. We've also followed SFO operations and noise impacts and have attended the roundtable meetings for over 10 years.
Steve Rinaldi, City of Millbrae.
Thank you.
I do think we have two people remote who may want to introduce themselves. Can we start with Than?
Good evening, Than McLeod. I was formerly with the FAA, retired the end of 2024. I am currently working for Lean Corporation in support of the airport. So I'm here basically when I was with the FAA, I did airspace and procedures and for the San Francisco airport and was involved in both the roundtable and the noise abatement procedures.
What else? Darlene may have done an introduction already for Mary Jo, so I believe I did.
Okay. Great. Good to see everyone here. And thanks for the introduction. Now we'll begin our discussions on the program by reviewing each proposed metric in the Firefly Quiet program individually. For each category, we'll discuss a brief overview of the metric and then open the floor for discussion among the TWG members, technical experts, aircraft representatives, and invited participants. We will also provide opportunities for public comment at the conclusion of the item to ensure public have an opportunity to share perspective and feedback. With that, I'd like to open the floor to Bert to start the discussion.
I think we're actually going to start with the overview.
I would appreciate that. Since it's
Okay.
Okay.
As we start, I wanted to, Marie Jo and I did want to recognize the Roundtable Airport and their staff for your ongoing commitment to reducing aviation noise. And what has always stood out for us is your willingness to consider new ideas, revisit assumptions, and evolve your approach as new information comes about. Whether it's a NEAM or N above metrics in today's quiet program evaluation, I think the openness to improvement has helped establish the Roundtable and the airport as leaders in advancing aviation for best practices for other communities. So I do want to express our appreciation. Today, we've been asked to put together a structured evaluation framework that's informed by themes that have come up throughout your meetings, including the Roundtable meetings. And so that's what we're going to do today. So we'll start with the first slide. Next slide. The framework is intended to have a consistent set of considerations for all of the elements. And we thought the best way to approach this is 3 questions, which is great that we have Dan here, because the first question is who has control? You know, does the pilot have control? Does the ATC control? Does the airline have control? That will tell us really whether we can influence this discretionary, optional program. So that's number 1. The second is it effective? Is it really going to reduce noise? And what communities are going to benefit? Not what communities are overflown, because that doesn't really tell you that they're going to be benefiting or harmed. It's really which communities are going to have a noise reduction. And then obviously which communities are those? So those are the 3 big questions. The next slide, and this is to give you kind of a summary of the framework. I introduced the 3 questions, and now this is how it all comes together. You look on the left, we look at all elements, and we say what kind of what element does it represent? A departure, arrival, or ground-based noise? And then there's 2 sections which I covered, which is who has control and how much control. And the second section is, does it really reduce noise? So that's kind of the framework of, if you will, that we're going to be basing this on. And then we'll look at a template per element that matches it. So this is the grand summary once we populate it. Okay, next slide. So we can see here, this is the standard template. And the template matches what I had on the previous slide that will be rolled up. And the next slide I'll be showing in a minute, which will go into usage volume. But hold on a second. So as you can see, the top is who has control. The second section is how effective is it, the benefits. And then the overall benefit obviously is, the real net. And then if there's any clarifications that we've discovered or that we may raise in this meeting that we think is important. I do want to recognize that we did work with Bert before the meeting to try to, flush a lot of this out. And we also tried to take whatever knowledge that's available in director's reports and the previous meetings to pre-populate this as much as we can. But Dan is going to be key here in understanding who has control and also giving us other insights about altitude and so on. So this is the starting point of our discussion today. And now the game plan is to go through each element. And before we do that, the next slide tells you how we estimated quantity. So, one thing said usage volume. We looked at the last 9 months of director's reports. And again, this is estimated, but it gives it a better feel of a number than nothing. So you look at departures, and you look at arrivals and what the average is over 9 months. And this is, again, the estimated usage based on the director's reports and the splits they have in the reports. So we talked about, how many people benefit. It's also how many operations are we speaking about. So this is what's going to be referenced in the scoring for the low, medium, high. Again, you can always adjust it, but this is a good starting point based on the data. Okay, and then
Quick question, on that last slide.
Yes.
So this was through February 2026, which was prior to the construction and the runway shut. So this is a representative of the full operating normal airport. Yes.
Question. Okay, and then the last slide, this one here is the last part of just introducing the framework. As we look through each element, then we are going to summarize in this slide which cities are going to benefit so that it'll give you an idea of what the coverage is. So that will be very significant for your roundtable members. And some cities obviously are not directly under a procedure, so that's why they may not benefit. So just because there's zero, there could be a good reason or there could be not a good reason. So that both are valid in terms of us clarifying. Okay, does that give everybody a good feel? That's the framework. Okay, so now the list of procedures we just pulled from the April meeting that you all had, wrote the list here, and then we added two. One is Night Hush, and the other is Bodega Down the Bay. And so that comes to the total of the elements, and now we'll address each element. And again, we pre-populated where we could. Where it says TBH, that's the discussion. But of course, if we disagree, anything that's already populated, that's a discussion also. So that's methodology. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, great. Okay.
All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to start going through each of these procedures, and we're going to start with our first template, which is shoreline departures. And if you look underneath section 1, we have our first question of who has control. Is it air traffic control, airline, pilot, or other? So I would turn to Dan for that answer.
Right. Dan, if you could help us with this first section.
Okay. So I want to clarify first off, when you're talking shoreline, have you had discussions of actually reintroducing the old shoreline departure procedure, or are we just talking about anyone that flies via the shoreline? Just because and maybe, just to clarify, since this is my first meeting, are you talking about aircraft that depart like via the stick and turn down, or were you actually looking at reviving the shoreline DP?
Can you see in that visual there? And maybe we forgot we're going to have her give a one sentence per element at the beginning. Sorry, we
Similar to shoreline, known as truck-in or night.
So the trucking that's going the right turn trucking, not the that's
Correct.
what I just just because there has been talk about people wanting to reintroduce conventional departure procedures, and the shoreline was one of those versus the RNAV departure, the trucking version of it. So who is in control of the trucking? The departure procedures that are in use are decided by destination. So where the aircraft is flying, what runways are active, what Oakland Airport is doing, time of day, and weather. And it is all going to be the short of it is it will be air traffic because it is put into a computer and the computer will even override. So if a pilot says, I don't want to fly the truck and they file for the gap, for example, it's going to override that and it's going to give them the trucking. Now they can verbally then request a different departure procedure if they can't accept what the computer has given them, but most of them don't. They will accept what the computer has given them. Obviously, if they don't have an RNAV aircraft, they can't fly this departure procedure. But at San Francisco, we're over 99% RNAV aircraft. So, so there's not a simple answer of, of when you're going to get this, but it is air traffic control determined.
So Dan, I just wanted to check one thing. You said trunking, but I also believe it's night, trunking and night. Is that not the case?
So yeah, the night though, typically they haven't been issuing the night off of the 2/8. So when they do the night hush procedure, they're departing the 1. And so I was assuming that you were looking off of 2/8 here. But yes.
Okay, so if the pilot has no control or very little control, does the ATC have any control to determine when the turn is going to go?
Yes. For this particular departure procedure, depending on, again, on the time of day, if we're not in noise abatement hours, air traffic control can turn them when they reach 2,000 feet.
And who controls the climb then, Than? How do they climb to 2,000 feet? Who decides on that?
So the departure procedure itself has altitude climbing. So some of that is built in. Some of it will be dynamic. So if, for example, there is aircraft that are crossing the bay or aircraft that we're getting, that the FAA is getting from either Oakland Center or Travis, and if those aircraft are level, depending on how close they are, air traffic will either stop them below it or try to outclimb them. So that is pretty dynamic. Again, it's mostly air traffic. The rate of climb, the pilot does have some control over the rate of climb. A lot of that's, there's weight and balance with the aircraft itself. So they have their own, and then the departure procedure itself. So depending on which departure procedure you're looking at, you can bring it up and it may have certain crossing restrictions.
So just trying to net this out, sounds like it's very layered. First of all, ATC predominantly has control. Is there anything we can do with ATC? We don't have to go into detail, but is there anything we can do with ATC, or is that pretty much weather, traffic, other airports, etc.?
The only thing you might, so the trucking, which is the primary one that we're talking about here, the trucking has a crossing restriction of there's a fix called tie-dye, and there's a crossing restriction at or above 3,000. ATC can stop them, and then they don't have to make that crossing restriction. So you could reach out to, this would be something that you could reach out to the TRACON and ask that they don't do that. They're going to continue to do it, of course, if there's a traffic reason for doing it. But they are very aware that noise abatement, that noise is sensitive, and so that's all right. Why the noise abatement procedure already is don't turn them before 2,000. You could maybe say, can we raise that to 3,000? Reach out and see if the procedure could be changed to 3,000.
Okay, and so that's one possibility with ATC. The other possibility, you said that the pilot has control over the climb rate. How would you describe that? Is if ATC gives them direction to do something, then how can we influence the pilot and the climb rate?
So air traffic wouldn't do that. So we wouldn't. Air traffic would not want to take that control away from the pilot at any time, except for if they want to expedite a climb. So if they need them to stop, of course, they're going to level them off. And if they need to expedite a climb, they'll ask them to expedite. But they don't ever get into the specifics of what kind of rate of climb. And they wouldn't do that because they wouldn't want any of that liability, and they don't know how the plane is going to, they don't know how heavy the plane is or any of the, so that would really be the pilot community. And I really, any more on these RNAV departure procedures, they're really designed so that the plane flies at the most efficient settings. So technology is already, and typically if it's an efficient setting, it's one of the quieter settings in the plane anyway. But that is one of the reasons why the carriers and the industry likes the RNAV departure procedures, is that the airplane can figure out what it needs to do to be the most efficient and get to altitude as quick as it can without wasting fuel. So you could talk to the airline community and see if they feel like when they're flying this departure procedure, if they feel it's an efficient procedure. Because if it's not, then that would be something that it would go back to a design criteria.
May I ask you, Than, the key question is, what would you suggest to make the turns as tight as possible? Because that's the objective from a noise abatement perspective. The Roundtable would like the turn, which is dictated by the RNAV procedure, to be as tight as possible. And you can see on that little insert on the top right-hand corner, there's a broad spectrum of turns. So how would you make that tighter turn? Would you need to change the RNAV procedure, settings, or what would you do?
It's possible that the procedure could be, so that the aircraft has to climb to 520 feet before it starts to turn. And that criteria, a lot of airports have asked if that criteria can be changed. And so far, the FAA has not been able to touch that criteria. So you probably aren't going to get anything sooner than 520, but then also because they're turning toward Truckin, off of 28, they're going to be turning toward Truckin, and Truckin is not a flyover fix, so the airplane can gauge where it's going to turn. Air traffic can also send them direct to the next fix earlier. So what we could be seeing too on some of this is at 2000, air traffic is kind of intervening and telling them they don't really have to go to Truckin. So, you could look at that. How many aircraft are actually overflying? How many, when it's on the ones, are they going to tie-dye? Off the 28s, are they going to Truckin? Is air traffic kind of sending them some, early? Then again, there are so many factors on each aircraft type and how quickly they can make a turn. You could start to develop something that created a tighter turn. By adding another fix in there, making it a mandatory flyover. You could tighten that. You could tighten those tracks up a bit with design criteria. The problem, part of this is that once you do open up procedures, you can find that they get worse rather than better. But because everyone gets their say. You open it up and the airlines get to relook at how efficient it is for them. Air traffic gets to look at how efficient it is for them. So partly outreach to your flying public, asking them, if they're delaying their turn for some reason.
Okay, so you guys have any questions? Yeah.
Just Dan, Paul Gold here. Thanks for this is a tutorial for those of us who are not as fluent in some of these issues. But I wanted to focus on this for a reason, because I'm sure that procedures are going to come up a lot in the next out. I mean, this is a big deal. So, when I look at this tracing, which is in the upper right hand corner of the screen that hopefully everybody's looking at, and I can see those green tracings of the flights there. This looks like a really good procedure for citizens because on the ground, because the noise is primarily over water, which is kind of what we like.
This is not water.
Oh, you're right. So you're correct. So the first, well, that's almost unavoidable, I think, under the, as you come off the end of the runway there, it's a little hard to avoid that, I think, and also recognize they have to get to at least 520 feet before they can actually even turn. But I get that. So you're correct. I stand corrected on that. But they're making a turn and they're avoiding an awful lot of humanity as they do that. So this looks like a very attractive procedure. I mean, I'm just speaking as a layperson here. Which is not a difficult role for me to play. So this is a very attractive thing. So is the suggestion here for simple people like me that we would actually like them to turn earlier than we're seeing on this? The earlier the better, because then they're avoiding even that little tip above the tracings that they could.
Yeah, so I think how it reduces noise, avoid the shoreline cities when turning right as soon as possible. To turn
Okay. And so this is the point I'm getting to, sorry, that involves a change in procedure, which may be the most difficult thing for us to get done. Would that be an accurate characterization, Sam?
Yeah, getting the procedure changed is definitely a long term. I don't want to say it's impossible, but it is definitely a long-term goal. And what you would probably want to focus on is, could we add a fix that would get these aircraft to turn tighter? Because you can see the tracks that turn earlier versus the tracks that turn later. Do analysis on that, on why there is this big spread here, and see if maybe a fix closer than trucking, that was a flyover fix, meaning the pilots had to go to it, might force that turn earlier.
And to clarify, Than, adding a fix before the trucking fix, how difficult is that to do with the FAA?
So the FAA right now, so with the recent cutbacks, so the Flight Procedures Office in the FAA did lose people, and they have what used to be about a 24-month process has now turned into a 3 to 5 year process. So if you wanted to do this, the Flight Procedures Office is telling us right now that it's taken between 3 and 5 years to get procedures changed. And that's unless there is a safety, so right now they're really focusing on issues that are safety related.
And so that was a point I was actually trying to get to. So in addition to being 3, 4, 5 years, it's extended out here. You mentioned a whole bunch of other factors that enter into this that we can't, for instance, airplane efficiency, that they plug that into the computer and they don't want to, fuel is a big deal and they want to make sure that these are flying as efficiently as possible. And for changing that procedure, if it fights against that, if it becomes an inefficient operation of the plane, they're not going to like that very much.
Right. At the end of the day, so it is kind of a work group that you work through. And at the end of the day, you would end up with what you have, so you could go through the process. It's just, I know all I was trying to get at is that you don't want to ever go and assume that you're going to get what you want. It is a work group, and everyone has their needs. And criteria changes. So when you go to redesign something, you may say, oh, we'd like a fix here. And now the criteria is typically it starts with ICAO, it starts internationally, and then the United States takes that criteria and turns it into TERPS procedures for the United States. And so they are evolving as aircraft equipment changes, and as we learn more, this criteria does change. And so you may say, oh, I want to fix closer to trucking, and the very first thing they tell you is, no, now the first fix has to be this far away. We find that the aircraft computers aren't registering it quick enough. This is becoming a problem throughout the world, and we're not going to let you do it. So that's all I'm just, it doesn't hurt to try. It would be long-term, but then just know that you can't guarantee that that would solve your problem.
And would it be safe to say this one appears to be a heavy lift?
It's just knowing this procedure and knowing that it turns toward Oakland, and you have, because there's also other communities that, so we know that the communities in the East Bay don't like this procedure at all.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah, it's not an easy one because you do have other communities that would be fighting you on it.
Flip side of this coin is the night departure. The night departure is not as tight of a turn and tends to go over the community more because it goes the middle of the day. So that's what we're trying to figure out here is rating distance. I know I've talked with Dan before when we got the night, and the original was a vision. Sure. And you didn't have to get to the end of the runway, and you didn't have to get to 520 feet. You could do it at 400. Now we have an RNAV all the way to the end of the runway, 520 feet before executing the right turn.
That's true of night as well.
All RNAV
Only shoreline is
gone.
Oh, so they don't have that.
It's still called.
So it's all shoreline.
So Dan, my question, we understand the long-term process and the fix, what's involved with that. Is there any low-hanging fruit that can be explored with ATC or the pilots to influence this at all before the fix more complicated solution? That's a question.
Yeah. So I don't really have any magical low-hanging fruit on this, other than maybe to add to your clarifications is if we could do a deeper dive into what it is that's causing some aircraft to turn later than others. And Bert, maybe you've already done that. If it truly is just aircraft performance, then probably not a lot we could do with it about it. If it's just, if it truly is pilot preference or if something else is going on, or if, like I said, if air traffic is kind of sending them to their eastern fix, there's these fixes off to the east that they wouldn't have to fly over Truckin. They could now be north of Truckin. Maybe that would be something that you could ask air traffic to stop doing, stop vectoring until after Truckin.
Right.
Yeah, so to me, that clarification would be a potential step, and the other possibility is a longer thing. So just to finish out this slide, confirm that it's ATC control. Time of day, is it all day?
Yes.
Okay, it's all day.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Bert though. Bert, are you issuing the night off of runway 28 at night?
Yes.
Okay. Because when we first started that, the night hush procedure, we specifically excluded the night off of runways 28, and only did it off the ones. And partly that was because of the way the night flew, and it didn't seem to have as much benefit. So I was just curious, but things have changed. So, okay. So again, this departure though is for aircraft that are going eastbound. It is not issued to aircraft that are going to the LA basin, where you might look at this graphic at the top right and say, oh, they could continue their right turn and continue down to Los Angeles. That does not happen.
Yeah.
Not during the day.
How about supporting the return of the shoreline? Is that something that we should get behind?
I don't know I'm not sure where the FAA's position on that is, but I know that other airports, Bert, are asking for that. To try to get away. The biggest objection to it tends to be the airlines, because they're not efficient. They're not efficient procedures. And air traffic anymore, it kind of depends on at San Francisco. Air traffic is so involved in the departures that air traffic they wouldn't object to having a conventional procedure, but the carriers may. And then how they tie in to the en route structure. But you can always ask. Other airports are asking, they're putting in gateway requests for a conventional departure procedure. And they're not asking it to replace, it's in addition to, and then you can really kind of use it as a noise abatement procedure.
And Than, I'm not familiar at all with that all conventional shoreline departure, but can you contrast for everybody how different that all shoreline departure is compared to this RNAV one?
Yeah, one of the biggest differences is that they turned out of 410 feet or 400 feet. So they didn't go to the end of the runway. And technically, they don't have to go to the end of the runway for an RNAV, but it's how the aircraft are engaging that they do. So as soon as they reached 400 feet, they were allowed to turn. I'll just see if I can.
And turn to heading 040.
Yeah. And then they also had a crossing restriction of 4,000 feet at the Oakland VOR. Instead of tie-dye at 3, there was a 4,000 foot restriction on the shoreline, and it was the Oakland VOR instead of trucking.
Van, can we get the airlines to change what they enter in the flight management system about not going to the end of the runway?
I couldn't answer that. I'm sorry. That's a good question for the carriers.
Okay.
I don't believe so. I believe the FMS engages as it engages.
I know we've tried it elsewhere, like in Boston.
Yep.
And we had to go back to a conventional, they couldn't turn before they were going over the city.
Okay, so I think the last question maybe to ask here is Brisbane a community that benefits from this? Terry might not know because the turning early. Would they benefit if it turned early?
South City, Brisbane.
Yes.
So I'm not sure what they're doing right now, but I mean, I hear and see every plane that uses this at night. Yes, yeah.
That would be a night, not the.
That'd be not from.
The reason being, I say, is the truck-in shifts over to the night to go up the middle of the day and not overhead open. And in doing so, relaxes that turn, brings it back over. Not as tight of a turn. Right.
So you're saying she might be experiencing night, not trucking?
More so.
More so, but you think she'd still benefit?
Lousy trucking or.
So just to be clear, nighttime trucking is not making the tight turn to go to the east, and instead it's kind of heading straight to the center of the bay to get out.
They convert over from the trucking to the night.
Okay.
Most
All right, well, this was a whopper. Is there any other questions on this one? It sounds like there's a very long-term strategy, which is in TBD, but it sounds like qualifying questions that we can ask ATC and the pilots just to see if there's some modification that can be done. Okay?
Let me ask you a question. Do
Yeah.
you think that based on everything you heard, this is appropriate for a fly quiet incentive?
If the answers to these lower hanging fruit questions are possibilities, then there could be. Otherwise, unless you change that, you can't put a flight program. Nobody has control. The ATC is going to tell them what to do.
Yeah, I don't look at from my
sorry.
view, I don't see this as something we can incentivize people to do.
Unless you get answers to those.
Yes, there's much flexibility on it at all in this. We're going to be changing the procedure, which Dan was saying 3 to 5 years. And it's very unlikely unless it's a safety thing. So
I think that there is.
incentivize you up there.
Well, I think if we make a list of things we want to ask ATC and the airlines, we can just completely shut this, you know what I mean, down. If that answer turns out to be now, I think we should just create our cumulative list. This is what we want to confirm, right? To confirm they have control.
We could use an alternate track, which would be try to get conventional departure shoreline.
Correct.
And then at that point, you
Yeah.
can come back and do the flight.
Correct.
Because then it was pilot control. whether you-
Well, and for some communities,
That's all.
like Brisbane, if they do, instead of doing the night, we're benefiting from this.
Yes. Correct. So I think I want to say at a positive level, we step up. This conversation is very useful because we're making conclusions about flight quiet. But we're also making other insights about things we might want to pursue, like a conventional procedure, like, so I think all of this should be in the parking lot, in our notes, because those are future things that TWG can work on that may not be the flight quiet. So if that makes sense. So we're not throwing everything out, we're sorting it.
It's also good information for our 5-year strategic plan. So
Yes.
we will be planning out with the roundtable, so we're working on over the next 5 years.
Right.
So I'm kind of taking notes on that.
I will say a firsthand experience that Dan mentioned. You go in and you want this, and they come out with something that could be worse. So and we've seen it. So
That's true.
they once it goes in the sausage machine, they keep making whatever sausage they want to make.
Worst case scenario, they feed it into chirps, which is they're one of their models that they run on a procedure.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, hey, things have changed.
Yeah.
And we can't let you fly this one at all,
It's not as safe. Yeah.
or whatever. So yeah, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Right.
So unintended consequences. Okay, let's move to the oceanic.
So this is right.
This is
So we're gonna bounce back and forth.
Yeah, we were just gonna go down the list. We tried to make it a variety so that we don't fatigue anyone.
You don't want to get bored.
No. Okay, so Steve.
So right now we're looking at oceanic, woodside gate crossing altitude. And who has control of this procedure over here? Would this be air traffic control, airline, or pilot? I think that'd be a question for Dan.
it's the altitude band.
Do we want birds to get the quick?
Okay, sorry, we're jumping the gun on the, sorry, Bert.
You guys pretty much covered it. So these are the Pacific Ocean arrivals coming in, and typically they go to the navigation beacon known as the Woodside Gate. And we like to see them cross at 8,000 feet. Radar variations out there, plus or minus 300 feet is acceptable. And for those who are curious, the great alongside Oakland Airport.
Dan still here?
We are. Oh, she's
Dan, I think we have the question to you about the control about the altitude.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. So the noise abatement problem is that Woodside, or so if they come in on the Pirate, they're stopped at 10,000 feet by the center, and then the approach control, the Tricon, will lower them. They're supposed to cross the fixed ARG, which is the Woodside VOR, basically, at or above 8,000 feet. And then they can descend past that down to 6,000 feet until they cross Victor 25. So there's a kind of a line that they can step down. They're going to be coming in at 10, then they'll go to 8, and then they go to 6. That is current noise abatement. It used to be reported on a weekly basis. We had to, the FAA had to generate a weekly report on how many aircraft violated that, and that would have been an ATC violation because the pilot's not going to descend without air traffic control. So it's definitely ATC control on this one again. The altitudes, they are trying to blend them in. I mean, you can see this particular arrival, it gets blended in with the arrival from the south and the arrival from the north and the arrival from the east. So it tends to be the one. The airspace to the west is the only airspace air traffic has to vector. So you'll even know when you get to the surfer, and you'll see they always turn those guys left from the south, they'll turn them left to Vector, because there's other arrivals and departures to the east. So and there's the San Jose really occupies that stuff to the east. So the west airspace is where they're doing all this blending. And this particular arrival tends to be the one air traffic will manipulate the most to make it fit. If you're asking, go ahead.
You said they used to report. Why do they not report anymore?
The expiration of that request, it was a congressional request and it expired. Basically it's a workload issue. And it turned out that for at least a long period, compliance was really good. Now, maybe when you quit reporting, compliance starts to drop. And so that would be definitely something you could ask for at any time. You could ask the FAA could we do a compliance report? And then you could ask for the weekly reports again. I do know there'll be pushback on that just because of the amount of the workload on that. So the FAA has kind of stopped providing mandatory compliance reports, but they will check, and the BERT can go directly to the TRACON on this. Anything that is a existing noise abatement procedure, the airport has the ability. They don't have to go through the service center. They don't have to go through the regional administrator. They can go directly to the controlling facility. So if it was something that Oakland Center was controlling, the noise office could go directly to Oakland Center and say, could you run a compliance for me on this? Or can you take a look at this? So the airport has the ability to go directly to the TRACON and say, we'd like to see, is this noise abatement being complied with? And that's any noise abatement procedure that's in existence. You can ask for compliance. You can do it on a 1-by-1. If you get a noise complaint and in your system, you look at it and the airplane is below the 8,000 at Woodside, you can absolutely ask, well, why? Why is this?
So, Bert, is there anything you wanted to add on this? Because I don't think the HC is the control on this one.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's a thumbs up. Is there any other discussion on this one?
I'm curious how many people actually violate the altitude levels. Please for noise abatement, you figure the higher they are, the less noise there is. And they were saying there are people reporting weekly. Seems like they just kind of threw it out because there wasn't any violations. Or...
Yes, that's what we've done. That's when we stopped monitoring it because we were getting really low numbers, like 0 to 1. And then every now and then you jump in and check it, and it pops back up. And then we check it again later and back down. So kind of hit this right now.
Marie Jo, is there anything you wanted to add, or otherwise we'll move on?
No, I don't think I need to add anything. The issue is, and Than is very familiar, is this 8,000 feet crossing. I want to emphasize that downstream communities are impacted by the noise by putting that 8,000 feet minimum because they do speed breaks. They do some weird stuff over the East Palo Alto, Menlo Park, etc. When they go and make that turn. So
I think the myth that is that if you raise altitude over one community, it doesn't mean everybody benefits because you raise the altitude and then everyone stays the same. So guess what? They go have to slam on the brakes as they go into their arrival. So don't ever think raising altitude is always, a win for everybody. So okay. All right. Next one is night hush.
We already
Kind of covered this with the
talked about night, yeah. As far as night hush goes, it's a program that we are monitoring to make sure the aircraft between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. stay off the peninsula. And we report out director's reports monthly and track it internally and report out weekly.
Is there anything to incent them further? And
I encourage the airlines to do 050.
Yeah.
They don't like to do the full night, as you can see, defined by the green arc there. That is a true night from SFO or a hush going around the peninsula like that. Now, approximately where the tip of the yellow arrow is where the GOB waypoint is. Not all airplanes do it. But if they were to do that procedure as shown, it was approximately 25 air miles to the departure. The airlines don't like it. So I, time when I had discussions with them, point out the purple. And if they use those, they will actually save a few air miles over doing that orange type turn, which is okay. And we don't want them doing that.
well, Bert, should we have 050 as one of the elements?
We can report out how many think about. They can't always get it.
Right, under all the other conditions.
Yeah, and sometimes they have to wait a while.
Which one's 050?
That purple, the tight right turn there.
So it's the one that saves the air miles and oxidates some of the noise within.
But they don't have control about that.
Well, they can ask for it, but they might be told you have to wait.
Timelines.
So the reality of airlines for the true night hush, the southbound green arrow, all of those are efficiency and market control the miles of ground.
Yeah, some of the airlines are kind of shaving the corner by doing what we call a gap departure, which is the gray ones going west.
Which we'll get to. Well, good, because there's so much tracking around night hush, thought it should be an element, but I guess we're what's your thoughts, since it isn't director's report? Not really.
Right now, we're just reporting, are they doing it?
Yeah.
I think
Jill, yeah.
Are they not doing this? Or they can? Yeah. Typically, they're not.
Looks like Dan has done with it.
Yeah. Dan?
I think Mary Jo had her hand up first, but
Go ahead, Than. Go ahead.
I did want to say, I think there is room for improvement on the air traffic side on this one. It might be worth reaching out. Because this isn't the 050 heading is allowed, but not required. There are teams of controllers, at least there were when I left, there were teams that wouldn't work very hard to make that happen. And I'm not trying to diss them, but if you have a procedure that is separated and it works and you don't have to do anything special, you might tend to just use that. And so a pilot might say, hey, can I do a 050? And some controllers won't work very hard to make that happen. So there is room here for some negotiation with the airport and the TRACON to maybe emphasize this as a higher priority than it currently is. It is true that you can't do it when there's arrivals. So you can't just mandate it. You can't say we will run the 050s because it is traffic dependent, but there are times that it could be run and we're not seeing it being run.
And could we get a report on that, Dan?
Yeah, you probably could. Yeah, you could ask to have that looked at, and then just ask, because it does tend to work when, for example, runway 28 as the arrival runway. If it's not being used, if they're running aircraft, if there are not enough aircraft that we need to use both runways at night, and aircraft are landing on the left runway instead of the right when it's single file, that should be questioned. And yet we saw improvement just by the airport saying, hey, we really mean this. We really want 28 right to be the landing runway. So just getting the TRACON to know that this is important to the airport will go a long way. the air traffic manager at the TRACON does care what the airport wants.
Dan, a quick question for you, Paul Gold again. What are the conditions that are necessary to get to the 050 procedure?
Basically, the Hayward and Oakland arrivals have to be done. Yeah, if you have a bunch of San Francisco arrivals and you're vectoring, so you can't have a bunch of arrivals. And typically around 1 a.m., unless there's been weather back east and the arrivals are late, typically the arrivals are done and the bay is free of aircraft. But yeah, they're going opposite direction to the arrivals and there's just not enough room in the bay.
So this is a perfect thing for nighttime.
So I do have a couple of comments on the 050, which is, it can benefit people as long as they really go through the middle of the bay, because for a while I can tell you they were not flying center bay and they were so close to the shoreline, then you are just getting the noise of all the cities south of the airport, and you get quite a few people. So that's the caveat, is also what center line do they use when they do the 050. Yeah. And going back to the night hush, in fact, what I would like to ask Bert is, with this program in place on the night hush, did it prevent any stick departures between 1 and 5 a.m.? Because that was the original goal, which was to stop the stick departures between 1 and 5 with the night hush.
Traffic control has established within their computer a soft start at approximately 10 p.m. And then it goes into a firm operation between 1 and 5 a.m. where they won't issue the stick or candles.
Okay.
Now, a lot of what we're seeing are particularly right in the first 15 minutes. A lot of flights are scheduled out at 10 till, and they have the stick, and it takes them, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes to get off the gate, taxi, whatever, and they get out there and they don't have to change. They just still do the procedure they were given, and nobody interrupts.
I got a real quick question for you. Maybe I'm being ignorant here. Maybe someone mentioned this earlier. How many of these flights actually do the stick procedure? The stick or the actual stick during nighttime? Is it
all the way up to 1 a.m.? Yeah, very large.
Very large.
So that's probably a bigger thing for public there to see,
incentivize that.
Yeah. When you're going over in the same city.
It's 155 a day.
It would help.
It's like 18. It's on 18. Can you just say something about the center line ban? Are they supposed to be going down the bay?
So because it's a heading and it doesn't have a fix, the Sunny departure, the 120 off of Oakland actually has a fix. It has a fix called Sunny. The 050 off of San Francisco does not. So that's definitely something that you would want in the abatement procedure, that they vector the aircraft to remain over the bay. And you could, and you can finesse that whatever, or, vector toward or over Sunny. It doesn't have to be on their flight plan for the controllers to know how to do that.
So that doesn't have to be a procedure change. I'm just checking on the 2 to 3 year process. Okay.
No.
All right.
I asked Dan a long time ago, can we get this charted?
Yep.
She recommended that we not.
Okay. All right. So a walk away is that we should explore 050, and that's an ATC type of conversation. So I think that makes sense. Yeah, but on the center line with these other things that don't change the procedure.
But isn't it possible that we track pilots that requested or denied it? And even if they requested, they could get flight quiet points.
That's what you and I were just talking about. How do we incentivize it for the pilots? Yeah, since is it a point for requesting it, even if they may not get it, or is it like how would we?
Can we track that? But didn't it become more of a point that Dan was saying that air traffic control and working with Traycon too?
And I also think if you get more pilots requesting, then you get, if you're gonna get the message to the controller, then maybe we should look to allow more pilot crossing.
Van, what do you think about the opportunity to encourage the pilots to ask for the 050?
I would recommend that you do ask for it. And I know that that's not an easy thing to track right now unless you can get some kind of AI voice evaluation that listens to the frequency and can track when they request, because the FAA doesn't have any way of tracking what a pilot requests if they're not given it. It goes a long way. If the pilot wants something, there are controllers that will go out of their way to help a pilot if they ask for something.
One question for you, Than. When they do 050 departures, and let's assume it's between 1 and 5, then it conflicts also with the pirate arrivals that are very noisy between, around 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. every day from Hawaii, typically. How do you, the pirate arrivals get priority over the 050? Is that how it works?
Yeah, the arrival will probably always get, they see the pirate arrival coming for a long ways, so they would know, and they would deny a 050 if it was going to conflict.
Okay.
So it sounds like there's a two-part strategy for the 050. There's the ATC, and then there's the pilot. But let's get back to night hush. Does this need to be an element or not? I mean, Marie Jo, do you have a view on this? Because of all the constraints.
Yeah, given the constraints and the very, small volume, I just, I don't think this is something, I mean, it's still worth tracking separately, but I would not necessarily put this as in the flag quad as points, especially if you favor an 050 departures, right?
Yeah.
What's the likelihood we could drive someone to do night hush if we heavily incentivized it? Because looking at that flight path, and we're pretty much not going over any neighborhoods, you're right over the water.
But they don't want to fly the 25 miles.
Because of the efficiency.
Yeah. I guess that's trying to encourage them, but it's.
It affects other communities. It depends on the board too. We're talking about good publicity, but it's going to be about it.
But I'm curious, for the small number that do this, why are they doing it? Right?
Yeah, that's a good
a
question.
very small number that is doing night hush. Well, why are they doing it? I'm just curious.
Because they're told to.
By
The Roundtable. The Roundtable got an agreement with the FAA.
Oh, yeah, sorry. You're right. So they don't have control during those night hours. The FAA agreed that they're going to direct them to do that. So
we could.
And this came directly from the airport to the FAA. And this is something that a procedure that I did work through. So it did come from the community. It started with the community, then the airport held meetings with the carriers. And I know that there's been a lot of requests to extend the hours on this from noon to 6. And really this night hush procedure treats Oakland and San Francisco airport as one airport. So they're putting aircraft in trail. So every San Francisco departure has to go in trail with an Oakland departure. So it does slow things down. And the 1 to 5 a.m. is when the traffic is slow enough that air traffic has agreed to do this. They've not, so far as I know, not agreed to extend the hours. But this was nothing that the FAA wanted to do. They did this because they were asked to.
okay, so I think that it's not that this isn't important. It's just that it is now the direction by ATC to have them do it. So my one question then is, for the communities that are listed on this slide, do they benefit from 050, or are they different? Or is this list different in any way? If we make 050 an element, are these the right cities?
I think it's the same as the night hush.
Okay, so San Bruno, we've had a question mark. I'm not sure San Bruno was.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right.
But
Okay,
again, on the 050, as Than said, if you know, because there's no fix right now over the bay, they can just pretty much take off and be very close to the shoreline and really disturb many more people than if they had
Yeah,
not done an 050.
I think that we want to add that as the,
Yeah.
we're gonna add that as part of the note, as the requirement, the center line, yeah.
Just want to be good steward of everyone's time.
Yeah.
And Terry, I don't know if you could find her. We have the room till 7:30.
Like anybody's gonna come kick us out.
Is there a hard stop for us? I just want to make.
Not in my world.
We have Jeremy.
We're gonna look at it.
Yeah,
All right.
I have a key.
okay, so we all good on this one, everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Good job. This is good.
Yeah, that was a good one, Larry. Okay, the next slide. So the next slide, we spent a good conversation with Bert ahead of time. And the element was nighttime arrival 28 right and off-state arrival approach to 28 right. It was one element. And our thought is that you separate these two elements because you could do the arrival and 28 right without the offset. So I think you want clarity on, you know, what you're incenting, what you want people to do. So that's kind of the overview comment. Bert?
Right now, I think that we're barking up a tree, mainly because the FAA's redesign of our arrival procedures. They don't want offsets. And they don't want the side-by-side arrivals. Could change, but we're in negotiations.
Even after the construction.
Yeah.
This is the way
Separate
it's gonna be.
construction, yeah.
They're not coupled.
Construction has nothing to do with it.
Correct.
They're changing the stagger and they're.
Yeah. So they've been examining safety at different airports. It's the Washington DC TWA and military helicopter incident. And one of the outcomes of that was more side-by-side SFO. So when they looked at the procedure, and I really feel for Dan on this one, she did a ton of work to get the FMS bridge approach, which is an offset approach over the day, to be safer. Airlines were encountering, I forget what it was, Dan, 70 or so a day of the alerts. TCAS alerts called resolution advisories, RAs. And after she and the team did their work to modify the procedure a bit, they got it down to 2.
It's nature.
Yeah. So I've always thought Dan was a magician. And that proved it for me.
And that just went away with the wave of the hand.
Yes.
So even though they can't use left and right, that we could encourage using right.
We can ask for that at given times of day. And it's, I don't know, I haven't seen Dan, you know if they revised the 71.65 for NCT?
So I have been invited to the safety risk management panel for trying to turn this back on and get that FMS bridge visual and quiet bridge. The quiet bridge will match it in July. So they are looking, they're trying, Bert, no guarantees on anything. Right now, the noise abatement procedure in effect today is to use runway 28 right when traffic permits. So when you don't have enough traffic to have to land both runways, and that would be the stagger bys, and those would be straight in, like Bert was saying, but they're supposed to be using 28 right. So this would be a good question for, is this non-compliant? Because it should be compliant. The 2 things should be happening. The tower, the air traffic control tower should be advertising runway 28 right as the landing runway. And then the approach control should be issuing it. If it truly is slow, so if we're talking when there's not very many arrivals, then an offset approach is possible, but you're really going to want the pilots to request that. That isn't going to, because air traffic's going to do what's advertised, and the offset approach, not everyone can do it. So it's got to be a pilot. That's going to have to come from the pilots. And I know that sometimes getting pilots to request things can be difficult, but you'd get more bang for your buck if they would request it, because they can always just be denied. And it's not, it doesn't cause any trouble. The air traffic just says unable, expect ILS or whatever they need.
So I just want to clarify, you can still do the offset, even though this can't land visual on the parallel runways. Is that right? There's still
Correct.
an offset.
You
Okay.
can do an offset. You can't do the FMS bridge visual, but there is an RNP offset. And that's why the only problem with it is that the FMS bridge visual, almost, 90% of your arrivals can do that. They can do the visual. Not everyone can do the offset RNP. And so air traffic is not going to assign that because there's too many airplanes that can't do it. So it would have to be a pilot request, but there is an instrument offset approach that is available if traffic allows for it.
Okay. So I think we've
I
got
want to ask a simple question. You said earlier, Than, that at San Francisco, the airlines love the RNAV and we have all the equipment on the carriers. If that's so, why can't they do an offset RNAV or RNP?
RNP is different. It's a required navigation performance. It's different than RNAV because it requires special equipment on board the airplane and special pilot training. So when you see RNAV, if something is just called RNAV, it can be RNAV GPS or it can be RNAV RNP. There are two types of RNAV, and RNP is just harder. It's got more requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's go to the night arrivals slide. Clarification, Van. This is a noise abatement at night, so should we just be tracking whether ATC is adhering to it or not, versus this is an ATC item, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, you need to make sure, first of all, though, that the volume allows so just because we're in the noise abatement time frame, so just because it's 10 p.m. doesn't mean that the volume of aircraft has slowed down enough to just use one runway. And if there's enough airplanes that two runways are needed, they're both going to be straight in. Then the offset's not going to be an option. They're going to be straight in on either the GLS or the ILS. And they're going to do that until the volume decreases enough that they can use a single runway. When you are down to a single runway, it needs to be the right runway.
So the ATC has control on the 28 right night times, and it really depends on what the overall volume is at the airport. Is that correct?
Correct. Something that we did. Yeah. And something that you might want to know about, and that we did right shortly before I retired, is we generated a automation. It's called a ghost target, because the sequencing for these airplanes is happening pretty far away from the airport. And as you can tell, they're turning. You've got aircraft coming down the bay and turning right. You've got aircraft turning left that go over the peninsula. And then you've got aircraft come from the south. And you've got different controllers working those airplanes. So it was difficult for the controllers at the approach control to know if their airplane was going to have enough room to land the same runway as the one in front of it. And so sometimes they would just go, oh, I'm coming from the south, I'm going to take the left. Those guys from the north, they can take the right. And they weren't work very hard to make the runway 28 right work. We came up with automation, and it's called a ghost target, that the controllers can see if they're going to have enough room to send that aircraft to the right runway. And it was to help this, it was to improve compliance on using the right runway. And that is available to them. And I know it's not mandatory, but it's something for you to be aware. They have this tool. And again, you can work with the TRACON to say, can we get more use out of this? And ask, because again, it's easier to just put aircraft on the south on the left and aircraft from the east on the right, and until it really slows down. But sometimes, just because there's multiple aircraft, you could make them all land the right. And so again, it's something you could ask for and work with my replacement on. Is there anything we can do to improve this?
Okay, so we're really talking about ATC focus, are these the right communities that are benefiting Foster City? We weren't sure about Redwood City and San Mateo. Do you have a thought about that? Dan?
Definitely, Foster City for sure. Or
Reason
I don't
why,
know.
yeah, we put question mark on Redwood City is because it's open space. It's not where the airlines are flying by. It's not even developed. It's not a residential area. And San Mateo also seems way too far from the tracks. That's why there were question marks.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
San Mateo, Redwood City, I'll buy with you, but the request was include any city that could be affected by it. And so,
But the
look-
fact that it's a night arrivals on 28 right, that's because we're not talking an early turn or anything like this here. We're talking a landing on 28 right. That's all there is on that slide.
yeah,
So if they land on 28 left, San Mateo is affected. That's what you're saying?
if they're straight in. Yes, the
They are.
runways are only 750 feet apart from center line to center line.
How
which is a-
how far is 28 left from San Mateo? What's the horizontal distance? It's more than 2 miles at least. I don't know. I have not measured it, but it's at least 2 miles. Anyway, we can take that offline.
About 3. If you look at the San Mateo Bridge there in that image, that's just about 6 miles to the runway threshold.
Can I ask a clarifying question on this? So I see the 2 red tracings coming through the bay, but that bottom one that comes in diagonally.
Where'd it go?
That's the surfer.
That's not, okay, so that's a different.
That's a different percent.
Okay, I just confused me because I'm looking at
No,
it
no,
here. Not the film.
It does, as well as the diamond, which is
That's got a different noise profile.
Yeah.
You're talking about
That's coming
where
down.
you landing.
And,
Same.
and that one.
Same place.
Same.
Okay. He doesn't show his lines going.
It looks like it's just.
So, Bert,
No,
how many
it's coming
flights?
down and turning on.
He's going this way and then coming.
Yeah, they're looping. It's looping.
These are coming down.
Teardrop.
These are coming down. And
It's not
Oh,
landing.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. They're
that's
coming
why
back.
they're included, because they
So,
build then line up.
They're going. So they go into dispersion over the peninsula, which is why you're not seeing it.
Gosh, they're in such a tight,
Part of
they're on such a red.
right.
They all have to be crossing the airport, and it's also
That's at the point where you see the air traffic controllers get into vector.
Bert, how many flights do you think we're talking about here? Because what we heard is it really depends on volume.
We do it 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's
Yeah.
significant.
But I mean, when there isn't,
and there's a
When
light
there's-
on it.
yeah, there has to be a lighter volume to do this. If there's a heavy volume, they can't do it. So the question is, what's the available market for wait,
What
Right.
time does it work?
yeah, what
In our workings with the band, we were able to request that they started around 10 to 11. And that's no guarantee. And airlines can always throw us a monkey wrench and decide that they want to schedule a whole slew of arrivals in that hour. And that pushes us
Or
back.
you get weather delay.
Or we get weather delays back.
okay, so
Right
it
before-
sounds like this is an ATC thing now, right? It's not a pilot.
It is.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right before I left, there seemed to be a push that was starting around 9:30 at night. And I recently asked, and it does seem that, so there is an arrival push that comes in around 9:30, and it often will extend beyond 10 p.m., but it's not typically too much later. Like Bert said, typically by 11, they can do this.
So just to close this one off, we know it's ATC, but we really don't know how many qualify that are benefiting to go 28 right, just to fill out the template. Do you have any feel for that, Don? Which is, it can't be all night arrivals. We just discussed that when it's too busy, you can't do it. You can't make them.
And I would guess, so once they can start doing it, and I don't know, we could get numbers on this, and I could even get numbers on this, on how many are coming in typically after the push, then how many arrivals we get for the rest of the night. Yeah, I don't have a good sense.
We need that because that's the only way we could weigh the effectiveness here.
Right.
Well, I would argue though that if, because it's significant difference for Foster City, whether they're riding crack or left.
Yeah.
It's either you're gonna get a wolf and buy it or you're not.
Yeah.
And so
Significant.
one is going to be beneficial.
Your point's completely taken. I get it. You're right.
So I think
This one, because of that, is a little bit different.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think the question about Redwood City and San Mateo would be interesting to ask their roundtable members. I mean, Foster City's a no-brainer.
Right.
Roundtable members.
Well, to your point, we don't know if those cities are affected. Right. Okay. All right. So I think let's just do a process check with
How many more do we have to
chairs.
go?
We have the offset, we have the three gap, yeah. We're about halfway.
Will the rest go quicker, do you think? Because of course, we have a lot of things.
No, they're
They're
they all are.
They're just.
Yeah.
They're all meeting.
They're all
We had
meeting.
conversation on the phone last week.
The good news is we had a 2-hour meeting before this meeting, so
I'd rather do it right.
Yeah.
Than, if we have to do another one of these, we'll do another one. That's my opinion.
I think this is helpful, and I'll just tell you right now, hearing Dan weigh in on some of this, telling us that air traffic control is some low hanging fruit, working with Traycon to really encourage this stuff. I think there's value here, and if we do have to kick it to another meeting to finish it, I think having Bert, Gene, our three experts here that are normally here as well, has been immensely helpful to me. This is the information we need, is seeing you, the five of you interact.
I don't think it's just quiet, right? It's
No,
pilot thing that it's
figured.
all
But I do want to end up with a fly quiet program
Yeah.
that actually can have to do that
absolutely.
too.
No. That is getting one of the deliverables.
Well,
I stay
You'd
true.
like to also have something that's not necessarily quiet, but also ATC.
Correct.
Well, that's what we're talking about, the
ATC
long
track.
term, the 5-year plan and, changing procedures.
I actually think there's going to be 3 tracks having to preview all this. There's an ATC track, a pilot track, and believe it or not, there's an airline track. Because airlines set policies on, they're not allowed to fly visual or whatever. So I think that's going to be sifted as we go through this.
So let's do this, and I'd expect if that's the will of the group here, I don't want to rush it. We'll do it another one. We'll do it another one. It's not that inconvenient.
I'm okay with it. You're okay with it. Everyone else?
Yeah, this is important stuff.
What do you want our stop time to do today? We're not going to finish today. Yeah,
I think it's more than that.
what? Yeah.
Is that okay?
What is the desired stop time? Because we can go up to the stop time. Yes.
7:30 is what.
7:30 is typical stop time.
Yeah.
But
Do you guys want to tackle one more? And you think
I would say one more.
is there one that you think is particularly low?
Go with those. Go with those.
Okay. All right. So the next slide, and after I introduce it, then Bert can do the overview. The next slide is slide 14, and currently the elements are altitudes, departures, and then Santana departures and gap vectoring departures. And we propose that all of them have an altitude aspect to it, so we probably should call it by procedure, if you will, which is gap oceanic, gap Santana, and gap early turns. That's what's really happening there is an early turn. So the altitudes would be defined by procedure and be specific to an aircraft type because that determines what their altitude can be. So that reflects obviously what you want to keep an eye on. So this is just explaining why I kind of rearranged it a little bit. Any questions on that? Okay, so now we'll start with.
So we don't have enough variables or all we get to go by aircraft size.
Well, if you want to, really want to check, you got to make sure they're doing it. Yeah. Okay, so Bert, gap ocean, it's a departure.
The gap oceanic used to be a relatively simple thing. Now we're really complicated. I have to be honest. And one of the things I was trying to get away from was really getting into the point where we're splitting hairs. The original was, do we have turns, early turn? Quantify those, record those, score those. Separate from that is gap departure, true gap departure, altitudes. Looking for the altitudes that go through the gap from SFO. And the third one is the Santanas. Are we noticing the Santana flights that go out the gap, up the ocean offshore from San Francisco, and do they come back across San Francisco? So mainly looking for those three areas that we were going to bring.
Is this the one we talked about where they have to make the gate out over the ocean before they turn? Was this that?
There's a 6 mile
the 6 mile versus
point.
the 8 mile.
Here,
And yes, it's approximately right here, just inside the shoreline.
Okay. And that's the gate they have to go through before they turn.
They're supposed to get.
So is that the early, if they turn before that, that's the early turn you're talking about?
Yeah, so either left or right, but typically left are the ones we're looking for.
Yeah. All right, I just wanted to understand.
So, Dan, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so yeah, like Bert said, there is a 6 DME, a San Francisco 6 DME point before the controllers can turn these departures if they're going south, if they're going or north, but if they are going north and it's between the hours of 10 and 7, then they're supposed to vector them west of the peninsula shoreline and then over the Golden Gate Bridge. So that's kind of that gate I think you were talking about. And that's at night. That is a current noise abatement procedure. And then the Santana, but I wanted to address the altitude. So the altitude during the day, if you're looking for higher altitudes during the day, you're probably not going to get it. The Santana has a built-in restriction. The Gap has an air traffic control restriction. They're all stopped at 3,000 feet. And that's because of the aircraft that are departing the ones and turning a left turn and going over them. So air traffic takes that off. And, and oftentimes on initial contact, they'll say radar contact, climb and maintain, and they'll keep them climbing higher. But they put that's called a paper stop altitude, and it's needed for separation. So now at nighttime, kind of depending, we could possibly entertain different altitudes at night, keep the altitude up at night, but it does depend because you've got of the stick. So the candle and the stick really interfere with these.
I was a little confused by your comment. There is a noise abatement procedure. Is there a layer to one of these with the noise abatement procedure?
So what the noise abatement procedure basically says is if there are runway 28 departure, you can't vector the aircraft until they get 6 miles out. Period. They're not supposed to vector them at all until they're 6 miles. They have additional requirements like the night. They can't vector the night at all. They're not supposed to vector night departure aircraft, and until either Rebus or Gobs. So they pretty much leave those aircraft alone. Other aircraft they can vector at 6 miles unless it's between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Then if they are going north or northeast, they have to vector them around the peninsula and over the Golden Gate Bridge.
So
I think it might be helpful to show the other slides, because right now we are all stuck on one slide, but the other things that Than is talking about is the early turn to the south and then the turns to the north. No, going after the gap departure.
Yeah, I was going to say at a high level, I think what we're trying to work through is how to address these three scenarios. Yeah, this is
This
a gap
is the
sample.
turn. That's the vector going north, and then the next one should be the one vectored south.
The visual.
Right.
That's the early.
Right.
Yeah, so again, because this is a noise abatement procedure, you can look at compliance. If they're turning them prior to 6, they shouldn't be if they're on the gap departure procedure. They shouldn't be turning them, and that's any time of day. If it's then, but for like the ones going northbound, you really need to break out the tracks for day and night and see which ones are non-compliant, because during the day, they only have to get to 6 miles and they can turn them. At night, they're supposed to vector them over the Golden Gate Bridge.
So who will this affect if we make them get to that 6 mile gate?
All the peninsulas.
It'll just keep them out over the ocean, so right. Yeah, it should be
Right.
just pushing that curve out.
Exactly.
ATC.
I feel like these three gaps are very complicated, Van, because there is some noise abatement procedure to them, and then there's other things we're trying to do to influence the pilot. I think we need to untangle that a little.
Yeah, but this is a huge one, I think.
Yeah, they're really.
And if we got ATC compliance, which
Yes.
I know that's
Yes.
difficult, and I say it much easier than we can make it happen, but boy, it would really help a lot of communities.
Let me ask Dan a question. Dan, on a gap departure, your experience on a split between a controller calling that early turn and a pilot leading the turn, what would you say?
If it's not been addressed, and I don't remember once, Bert, I really can't remember being asked to look at compliance on this particular issue. And if compliance is not being looked at, I'm going to guess controller non-compliance is high.
Okay.
Those are non-compliance. That almost seems like the theme of the last 3 out of 4 things we looked at had some kind of ATC component with compliance. So I don't know if it kind of come to the project reoccurring theme here or not.
Looks like nobody.
Well, I think we're seeing it's a lot more controller. Controller.
Yeah.
Right, because the Fly Quiet program was originally designed to the pilot control.
Yes.
It seems like we need to shift our focus over to the air traffic control system.
Well, you need to provide the well.
Yes. Yes.
What goes to the air traffic versus what goes to the pilot.
Darlene and Marie Jo are doing.
So.
Yeah. That's how we're trying to do that.
Sorry, I don't want to take us off track.
Is it true? I mean, I'm just checking our thing here. It's 3 a day for the early terms.
Low number.
So this slide that we have is months of data of early terms where nobody made it to the game.
Months of data on those green track tracing. Oh yes, months. You and I talked about this very one because you said they're not making the game, but this is over months and months and months. So the comment was that there's about 3 a day. So there's your bang for the buck.
Well, I mean,
it does make a lot of noise, but it's very few points. And the time of it is during the day.
It is nice.
But if you don't focus on it, it could just very few.
Well, we can incentivize so we can incentivize ATC to do
Right,
it.
I'm just saying.
But it's not a lot of bang for the buck. Maybe up for the
Not now.
Well, that's why I said low, right?
Well, but it's because it's noise abatement.
Right. So part of the issue here that we're trying to accomplish is we'd rather have fewer that can impact a lot of people than 13.
Well, what I'm saying is if this gets relaxed, it would
be a high.
Oh, I see.
Just many.
That's a great point.
So,
if I may interrupt, sorry.
This is the flying Jesus. These are the people that have the most noise.
They complain to us.
Yeah.
We hear
Yeah. I would like to ask Stan again. She went very quickly over some really important stuff, I think. Stan, correct me if I'm wrong. You said going south, they always must go these 6 nautical miles through that gate before they turn south. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Going north, you said you need to separate the day and night because it will depend on the, there is some restriction needed for separation. Is that the reason?
No, it's noise abatement. So at night, if they're going north, they have to go to the 6 miles, but they also then must, and the way it reads, it says they have to vector aircraft that are on the San Francisco departure, the Santana departure, or the Gap departure. They have to vector them west of the peninsula shoreline and over the north end of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Okay,
And
west of
yeah.
the shoreline. Okay.
Yeah, so it's basically, you know, a vector them around the peninsula and go over the Golden Gate. So you keep all these tracks that you can see on your picture there, but that is only at night. So if those
Right.
tracks are during the day, they're not non-compliant. And the only other thing I would say about compliance is that typically it's not malicious non-compliance. It's typically just drift. And that's why having the airport follow up on compliance can be very impactful because it just reminds controllers they're not, you know, they're just working airplanes. And they often forget about these requirements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's really clarifying for me. Yes.
On this Santana departure that we're looking at right now on the screen, what's the altitude of those flights as they're going over the San Francisco area? Just out of curiosity.
So the Santana, they stop at 3,000. And then air traffic climbs them. So I'm going to guess that there's a wide variety of altitudes in there. You can separate those tracks out by altitude and see, but if there's not any traffic, air traffic's going to climb them immediately. If there is, they're going to be held down. So I can't give you a good answer. I think we should separate them out by altitude and see.
Okay, so I think we're at our deadline for tonight.
This was really useful. I mean, this was the most useful meeting I've been a long time, but it's so complicated.
For me, it's really interesting because we did have a lot of technical working group meetings that were more of this style back when I was first on the PWG. And I think they were certainly more helpful to get, because it's so high level, you can't just listen and absorb it. You've really got to listen and interact and get differing opinions to even understand how it comes together. So, you know, I think that this format for the technical working group works. It's not like we have disruptions or things that are happening that might be in the regular meeting where we've got a room full of people that we are just trying to feed the line to. So I think this is a really good format to keep going with the technical working group.
I just want to add one other piece. You know, someone coming in that's fresh, hasn't seen a lot of this. There's a lot of conversations that pop behind the scenes too. I would just say that our number one goal here for this group is to really do the hard work where it gets really complex, have these nitty-gritty conversations, and then distill it down and simplify it as best as possible to bring it back to the program. Yeah, because I can tell you, reading you when I came in the roundtable, I'm sitting there and it's almost like that movie Airplane when you're hearing all these things like, what's your vector, and you know, you get lost. So keeping it as simple as possible for them. Yes, for them, and then doing the nitty gritty work here and being able to relate back what we're going to get the most bang for the buck.
And you will learn a lot here, even if you don't know the acronyms.
Yes.
You know, I think tonight it would have been good to have the slides that we had at the last one available, or bring your iPad or whatever. I think that made it easier, and it might have been good to have them labeled the same. But I know we had 2 different people working on it from last time to this time, and so they weren't called the same things necessarily. But I think that would have been
Part of the difficulty is that when we met, we realized clarify them more. They started sounding like they were the same thing. or they weren't vectoring, they were turning, you know, I so it evolve the terms a little bit, but yes, I hear you,
But
Jerry.
I also think this is more focused on the procedures versus the fly quiet. This is really procedural.
But I think until you understand the procedures, you won't understand what the results might be.
That's true.
And,
We all understand your
you know, we know what affects us, and we might not know what affects everybody else.
Before we break down, we do have to allow for public comment.
Yeah.
So, I think we have one.
Yes. Mr. Remy Tech? Please go ahead.
Remy, are you there? Can you unmute yourself?
Can we click on the participants?
Hold on, Mr. Remy Tam, and then, while we wait for him to be able to unmute, there is also another hand raised by Jennifer.
Okay.
Jennifer, please go ahead.
Thank you, everyone, for the work you're doing. I was really interested. Thank you, Than, for mentioning how opening up a procedure can turn out not exactly what you expected when you start, because the airlines decide to interject and introduce some of their priorities. So I had a question about how you spoke about the step down for the new pirate procedures, so to speak. And I want to sort of clarify this issue of altitudes. Yes, we don't always win if altitudes go up for someone else, let's say, and then the planes have to dive down. But there used to be an efficient procedure, which were the tailored arrivals. And I know that when pilots were flying that, ATC would also vector them. But I wanted to know what your view was about having a tailored approach where altitudes over, let's say, mid-peninsula would go back higher, and just the sort of evolution of these routes, but because the all-in, you know, everybody wanted to avoid step down and instead, you know, have more efficient approaches or optimized arrivals. So if you could speak to that regarding the oceanic tailored arrivals and pirate.
Just point of, am I allowed to answer that? I just didn't know what I could.
We really can't answer that because it's brought up in public comments. We probably could have done that if we'd done it earlier, but I think if we could save that for the next time, and that's one of the things that maybe when we look at what GBAS is aiming for is sort of that step down. That's what I'm understanding. But anyway, so I think that we can't really answer that because we did go into public comments. We're sorry.
Okay. Mr. Remy Tech?
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, this is again Remy Tan with Pacifica, and again, you know, thank you for the it's a really informative meeting, and just like to comment on the gap departures, because we're getting a lot of planes that are probably not meeting altitude. They're, you know, going over at 2,500, maybe 3,000 feet. And that's also pretty close to the hill. I'm not sure it even have 1,000 feet to the hill. And it seems to be the bigger planes, like the 4-engine jobs, 747, 380s, and some of the fully loaded 777s. So I don't know what we can do to work with the FAA and the airlines to make sure that they're getting enough altitude so they're not, you know, the noise would be a lot less, you know, down below on the gap departures. And, you know, routing as many of them, you know, to the trucking or the night departures, you know, if they can make the turn safely, avoid San Bruno Mountain. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other hands raised on Zoom or in the room.
Okay.
So
Please.
just, you guys did a fantastic job. I know the amount of work that went into this for us to get here tonight. And I just wanted to thank everybody who was involved. And it's been, as I said, a very productive meeting, but I think, I'm stunned by the amount of information and data that we have and how complex this matter is. And we're very fortunate that people who understand it as well as you do, because I don't. Okay, just want
Thanks for letting the discussion happen. I think we all benefited from that.
just gonna say, I want to thank everyone from the public that joined it tonight. Thank Dan for joining it. I know you're a consultant, but you're
Yes, thank you.
incredibly helpful in pointing out some of the slow hanging fruit. And our members, professionals from the public as well, really helpful. So thank you all for hosting it.
Oh,
Yeah. Thanks for
easy.
Yeah. Thanks, City of Brisbane.
Yeah, anything else that we'd like to discuss? Any number of dates? If there's no further business, thanks again to everyone. And who joined us, and special thanks to our staff and for all the work behind the effort. And we are adjourned at 7:46. Thank you.